are live with another episode of Growing with My Fellow Growers. This is Jack Greenstock, joined as always by an amazing panel. First, I'm going to pass it over to Spartan Grown. How's it going?
What's up, everybody? I'm Spartan Grown. You can find me on Instagram at Spartan Grown, all one word, or you can shoot me an email at spartangrown@gmail.com. I'm both an organic farmer at home or a synthetic farmer at work commercially here in Michigan.
Welcome back. Always happy to have you. And next up, Aaron the Grower.
Get mid scissor. Sorry. What's up, guys? I am Aaron the Grower. That's ATG Acres on Instagram, YouTube, and ATGacres.com on the internet. So check me out there. Get yourself a plant packer. And there go my dogs. They think I'm somebody else.
That's funny. All righty. Next up, we have Matthew Gates.
Hey everyone, this is Matthew Gates. I'm an IPM specialist for those who don't know. And you can find me all kinds of places. You can even find Aaron actually on my YouTube channel, Zentinel, because I started uploading our IGTV live streams that we did like months ago.
So
actually almost a year ago in some cases. Yeah. And I'm putting, I'm going to be putting the annotations there so that people can scan through them really easily. Because it's a little daunting to have like a whole hour, in some cases 2 hours of video content. But yeah, I'm excited for that. And if you want to find other IPM stuff, pest management information, you can check me out on my Patreon, which allows you to get access to my Discord channel. I've had a lot more activity there lately. And I'm very excited to be talking with more people and gathering, in some cases, interesting new observations in cannabis pests and then sharing that with everyone else. So I'm excited for that.
Welcome back, and thanks again for joining us. Next up, Kyle.
Hey everybody, my name is Kyle Breeder. I am a cannabis breeder that typically grows in organic soil. I do have, my specialty is feminized seeds. If you're looking for something like that, or you guys like to grow that, I do have a website. It's the letter P followed by breeding.com. If you want to look at anything I'm doing, or if you need to chat with me, feel free. I like communicating with the community. You can find me at Predicated Breeding on all social media platforms. I have been locked out of Twitter. I'm not sure why. I think I changed my password. I don't remember it. But so if you're trying to reach out to me there, that ain't going to happen now. But yeah, I'm glad to be here and excited to see what we're going to talk about tonight.
Excited to get into it. We have Noah the Grower to get to next, but I just wanted to say a friend of mine who's growing some of Kyle's gear got 8 out of 8 to germinate, and all 8 sprouted. They killed one, removing the little seed shell, but they got like 4 of them off cleanly, and so they have 7 growing out of 8, and it's their first time, so I'm excited for them to grow out some of Kyle's fem work. But last and certainly not least, Noah the Grower.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? Yeah, I'm Noah the Grower from Instagram. You can find me there. Just like Kyle said, if you have any questions, reach out to me. I like to interact with the community. I try to do it all the time and answer all my direct messages. And yeah, just happy to be here with everybody and ready to get into it.
You had a great comment before the show when I asked if anybody had a topic they'd like to talk about tonight, and you mentioned something about what people think of a 1-part organic nutrient or something simple, and I think we can maybe kick it off there. And Spartan, I think you were giving a little bit of your answer before I said, hey, we got to go live, because it was 4 o'clock and didn't want to keep people waiting, and I didn't want to miss any of the good conversation in the pre-show that we could get on the live. So Spartan, take it away.
Yeah, so for me, I use my media as my 1 part, kind of. When I build my soil, all the nutrition's there. Now I'm using an M3 soil as a base, which is just a bag soil you can find here in Michigan. You might be able to find it all across the country, I'm not sure. But I call it M3, but I think it's called, what's the long name on it? Michigan
Made Mix.
Oh,
Michigan Made Mix is the family-friendly name, and then they have the Medical Marijuana Mix, which, fun fact, they spelled it with an H because that's how Michigan spelled marijuana in the beginning with their legislation. It was
they still do, yeah.
Yeah, so it's M3. If you go to the Medical Marijuana Mix site, they have a bunch of people growing cannabis. If you go to the Michigan Made Mix site, it's a bunch of people growing tomatoes and flowers and a bunch of other stuff. So,
but yes, that's basically
we're sold out here in Massachusetts, man. This stuff's hard to find now because it's so good.
But I do sometimes we'll run into deficiency, and I'll just if my plant is even beginning to look like it's struggling, I'm going to top dress it with some worm castings, sprinkle
What's some
some.
common deficiencies you see first, Spartan?
For me, it's because I reuse my soil. So I normally I wouldn't see deficiencies if I just used my soil, ran it one time and dumped it. No, I'm usually pretty good. There would be a few that it would be a little bit hungry because they can't. How should I say? You don't want to make your mix so hot for the hungry plants so that the plants that aren't hungry get burned up.
Right.
So they generally will give you like a down the middle, and then the hungry plants you're going to run out. So for like an all-in-one, like if it's a deficiency that's not just a single, like if I don't think it's like nitrogen deficiency, or I don't think it's, if I think it's a multiple, like I'm reusing, for example, the best example would be when I'm reusing the soil, maybe I mended not enough. So after harvest, I didn't amend enough because I tend to err on, I tend to caution on the side of less instead of more. And so on my re-amended mixes, I'll start seeing deficiencies. And the one I see most often is nitrogen. It seems like nitrogen gets used up a lot. I'm not using a cover crop that's going to replace nitrogen. Makes sense to me. I amend with if I have a nitrogen deficiency specifically, worm castings will usually take care of that because worm castings are fairly high in nitrogen. But
Right.
If I'm seeing a bad deficiency, I'll also come in. I'll do worm castings, but I'll also come in with alfalfa meal.
What are you amending for CalMag in that in your mix that you're remaking or reusing?
So magnesium is usually not something that I run low on, but calcium is always amended, and I use gypsum mostly.
Nice.
But I have other like so gypsum is really good for calcium, and I use that on my reamendment. Because of that, I don't like to address a calcium deficiency with gypsum too, because I don't want to keep dumping gypsum. So I have other sources of calcium also. Crab meal I have, which is just basically crushed up shells of crabs, and it smells like what you would imagine a crushed up shell.
Probably gross as hell.
Yeah. And that's a lot. That was going to take a lot longer to break down too. So that's something that I'll mix in every, like on a reamendment, I might throw one in if I was struggling with calcium that run, so that I know that soil has a slow release calcium, kind of is the way I look at it. And then another one is oyster shell, and you can get the oyster shell crushed into like almost a powder form. So for me, that makes me think that's going to break down a little bit quicker. And so that would be the one I would kind of reach for if I was like in mid-cycle with a calcium deficiency, and I wanted it to be available more quickly. I'll just, come in with that and top dress with that.
I've always been told that oyster shell takes a long time to become available, but to be honest, off the top of my head, I don't even know if that's how true that statement is, and how many contexts where it isn't.
I'm looking at okay. How should I explain it?
I had like 7 days.
It's hard for me. It's hard for me to explain the way my mind. Okay, surface area. It's all about surface area.
That makes sense, though.
Besides,
already I can kind of see where you're going with that. I think.
Yeah, exactly. So besides whatever material it's made out of, it's probably pretty similar because it's both a calcium source. But one is flakes of shell that I can physically see, and the other one's ground into dust. So that ground in the dust one, between the two, and I admit, I don't know. I haven't looked at the science on which actually breaks down faster in the soil, but just surface area alone, I had got to believe that powder is going to do it.
And that has a certain sort of logic to it, right? That makes sense.
It typically is that way in soil because it's easier for the microbes to break down. If it's already powdered, It doesn't have to break down like the exoskeleton of that thing. It can just start to take whatever nutrient is available, ideally. And I think that's in the case because I don't find any of that stuff in one run. So, I mean, however long it takes to veg and flower a plant, you're not seeing a bunch of it still in the soil. And just for the people in the chat who might not be as familiar with the Michigan Made Mix, I have the ingredients list. I actually use the soil as my base and followed Spartan Grown's reamendment recipes to a lot of success with. Very rarely do I have like major deficiencies. It's always something that a little worm castings or tea or top dress can fix within a couple days to a week at the worst. Like I've never actually seen it take 2 weeks. Like if you're proactive and you check your plants daily, I think you can almost always fix it within a week or less. But the recipe is composted sphagnum, Canadian peat, vermiculite, fossilized seabird guanos, bone meal, rock phosphate, green sand, perlite, blood meal, and lime. And I think I could be wrong on this, but I think Coot in the past has said that some of these like shells are ultimately just lime at the end of the day. Like, does that break down into like lime or limestone or something else?
So calcium carbonate, I think, is the way
calcium carbonate. There we go. And those have an impact on the soil that adjusts the pH. So does the one thing that I mentioned in the mix, lime, has adjust to the pH, because when you're working with peat, it can be a little bit acidic from what I'm told. So when you're making a mix, it has to kind of take that into consideration. And I think people try to come out around like 6.5, but there's a whole bunch of different mixes out there. Brandon Rust uses a different recipe. The American one is joining us right now, so we'll have him here in just a few seconds. But yeah, sorry.
Yeah, there's things that I wouldn't, like if I were building my own soil, there's things in that mix that I wouldn't do. The biggest complaint for me probably would be I would want to do a perlite and pumice substitution. And then I would try to avoid some of the guanos. Everything else in there, I think I'm pretty okay with. But it's a really good mix. I'm actually testing 4th cycle right now on one of my plants, and I grow some pretty big plants. But it's getting to be where it's like I think that I'm either going to have to start soil testing, or I can't keep winging it like I am with just doing a broad spectrum reamend at the end, because something's getting out of balance. I'm sensing. I don't know if I want to try a 5th without doing some kind of at least a soil test or something. So I haven't decided. I might do resets here after the 4th, but hell, getting 4 cycles out of 1 bag of soil, I'm happy as hell about that.
You look at like Green Life Productions, and granted they're no-till, they're on like their 20, 30, or 40th thing, and they might be doing soil testing to get their amendments perfect, but I'm right about where you're at right now. 3rd run, coming up to my 4th with M3 that I've re-amended, using a lot of the stuff that you suggested, as well as some of Brandon's products from Bokashi Earthworks. And to be honest, I'm not too worried about it in getting like super thrown off, but it's totally possible. I could be setting myself up for failure without doing the testing, because it definitely offers you a lot. Maybe it's worth just sending in a batch that we're going to re-amend before, and then trying to target a little bit more specifically.
Yeah, it's hard for me. I don't feel that it's worth it for me to soil test when I have 4. When I'm, how do I want to explain it? Okay, I don't think it's worth it for me to soil test pots of soil. If I had a whole bed that covered at least a light's worth, that's worth it for me to soil test and put in the effort to balance my soil, make it perfect every time. But when I'm in a pot and I can pay for a soil test and fuck around with that, and it's going to cost me 4 times the everything, when I could just get a fucking bag of soil and just reset that and run it 4 more times, I'm already telling you which way I'm going.
Hey, have you guys heard about that 1 part like top dress? You guys seen that? I think one of you guys posted that in the chat, didn't you?
I sent it to the chat. It was like a slow release.
Yeah. What do you guys think of that? Is that worth trying or what?
I didn't see what was it again? Was it a nutrient or was it?
So a while ago, I sent a picture of a guy. He was like holding, I think it's like Osmocote or something, where they have these slow release nutrients.
All the little pebbles or balls that he had in his hand. Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah.
I just asked if you guys had any thoughts on it, and then so maybe that was part of the reason Noah had the curiosity. And I want to also give the American one a chance, because he's been here for a while, and I forgot to let him introduce himself. So welcome, the American one.
Hey, how's everybody doing? Yeah, I'm the American one, and yeah, I think that was the post with Scotty Real introducing his autoflower one-time nutrients, right?
Yeah,
and it just looks kind of like 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 you were saying, that Osmocote.
I didn't. I've asked around, but it sounds that's like some kind of a synthetic thing. Still, it's not. It wasn't organic to my mind. Or is it? Am I wrong?
He says the secret's out. Mondo one and done, all in one, single application, programmed release fertilizer for all your flowering plants. And it was Scotty Real post from Dude Grows. It's not going to show up because I got green screen.
Yeah, I didn't hear organic in any of that.
No, it's not. to my
Yeah,
knowledge.
no, there isn't.
I don't think that they pay for the label even with recharge, right? That doesn't have an OMRI listing to my knowledge, or they're not paying for the organic.
I don't know if it's got any. Well,
I don't think it does.
Does it? Well, yeah, he didn't have anything. He didn't have the new ingredient list or NPK or anything on there, did he?
It was just a very, very early pre-release, even, I think, like advertisement. So I was going to pull it up and screen share it, but it's probably a little too early into even, like, I don't think there's an MSDS available for this. I don't know if they're selling it. Let me see. The secret's out. Yeah, I don't think that they're actually moving this product yet. I think they're sort of just getting it out there. We're giving them some free advertisement for something that we haven't used, but it's an interesting thing to consider when you could go the route of mixing your own soil or using something like that. Or like Brandon has a different recipe. If you watch his YouTube, Bokashi Earthworks, someone I know who just started growing, they got every single thing on that list. I like sent them where they could get certain stuff online and where they could get certain stuff locally to get it all for the best price. And they mixed their own soil. They've never grown anything before, and they were able to mix their own soil watching his video, just like he did, and sprout seedlings in it. And like I said, probably, I don't know if it was during the introduction. They got 7 out of 7 or 7 out of 8 growing right now because they accidentally killed one. But yeah, it's proven to work as so far. And Brandon has had a lot of success with his different soil mixes. I've seen people growing with some of his older recipes and had success with those as well. So there's a lot of different options. I used to grow with subcool super soil, and I know a lot of people hate on that, but if you did the layer technique, like the lasagna, where you had like a kind of less hot mix up top and then the hotter mix down low, it was really successful for a lot of people. And I think that inspired Mendo Dope and others.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
So I was just saying, it still is, man. I still know plenty of people that grow that same way, and they do fine with it. Man, once you learn your way, just fucking do your thing. I'm fine. I don't care how people grow. You know what I mean? If they're growing the dank, I'm cool with it as long as they're not, poisoning people.
Yeah, and then you do something like me and completely switch everything up, and I feel like a kid again. It's really
so
weird
fun.
because like I have like 5 go-to things, and you know how it goes. Sometimes I'm only giving it 2, sometimes I'm giving it 3. In the middle, I'm giving it everything, and I've had great results. And then I got gifted some soil, and I just went all in. And man, in veg, I never seen nothing like this. I mean, I had a side-by-side an Ocean Forest and this Bio 365 soil. And I mean, the like clones I took off the same plant, same height, same everything. And it was just completely crushing it. It was probably 6 inches taller within like, a month. I mean, crushed it. Greenest I've seen it in so long.
I want to jump in real quick just because we have a question that relates so perfectly to this, Noah. Chad Westport in the chat asks, Fox Farm Ocean Forest count as an all-in-one ? I ask for others because I think that they realize what the answer is to that. But I'm curious because I know, Noah, you use it and you have your own little additional recipe, but maybe you could just answer yes or no and then explain.
Yes. Say it again. I didn't quite understand it.
So is Fox Farm Ocean Forest an all-in-one soil? Like, can you use that as water only start to finish?
No. Absolutely not. I mean, sure you can, but you're not going to get what you want. I mean, you're just not.
That's the honest answer.
Way. I have vegged with it. I mean, I've been growing with it for 11 years, but I mean, you can veg with it. Wait, I'm trying to think. Maybe back in the day, like it's been so long, I'm so old. Maybe I was doing like black gold in the beginning. Yeah, I did black gold, then I switched to Ocean Forest. But
I think they sell it at Home Depot now.
Yeah. Yeah, they do. Make sure you get the one with the pink bag. That has got time release stuff in it. Don't mess with your stuff. But it's just so that's where I'm going down it because I have a couple people that have been asking me about it, and then I just with this soil, it's so awesome, and I want to reuse it. I'm trying to do exactly that. I've never done that before. I want to do it because this soil is really awesome. But as soon as I hit it to 12-12, I instantly within like a week, it just started yellowing up. I could tell that it needed phosphorus, it needed nitrogen. So I'm like, okay, what am I going to give this? That's a 1-part organic bottle because I'm also going on vacation like 3 or 4 times, and I got someone that's going to be watching my garden, and I can't tell them, hey, you got to do this, you got to do that. I just kind of wanted to give it a 1-part. And when you start looking into it, and you're looking for the OMRI listed like organic stuff that you want to give to like a living soil, it hasn't been that easy.
So down to earth, BioLife.
Yeah. So BioLife isn't one I had looked at, but I was just looking at BioBiz. I'm going to be looking into that a little bit more. But the one that I got that the guy told me, he was like, yeah, they kind of rip people off, but I don't know anything about political. I don't know anything about it. But was it advanced nutrients, liquid liquid or organic, or it's
Dude,
it's
I tell
pretty
you,
good. It's pretty
this
decent
is
so
my
far.
this is my hands down what I'm using right now, and continue. Well, I bought fucking 25 pounds or some ridiculous amount of it, so I'll be using it for probably years now. But hit up my boy, fucking out there at Build a Soil, Jeremy, and support a fucking real dude, and just get craft blend. It's just like these other things, but it's just the raw ingredients mixed together for you, ground up.
He just took, for those who don't know, when he made the craft blend, people were buying this ingredient, that ingredient, that ingredient, and they were buying 5 pounds of this, 25 pounds of that, and they'd get all this shit, and then they'd only need a scoop of this or a cup of that. So what he did was put all of the most common used, re-amended things into one mix called the craft blend. So each run, when you're done, you can literally take a scoop of that and a scoop of gypsum, mix it into your soil, and you're pretty much there with a little worm castings to get yourself some microbes, some nitrogen. That is like most of Spartan's list, just off the top of my head.
That is it right there.
And there's a little sprinkle of, I think you use insect frass in the hole when you're transplanting in, as well as mycos. But I mean, other than that, you're literally taking the old soil.
Yeah,
You just drop the old soil in, and then start with a little extra. And I do like a lasagna on the top with some bokashi worm castings and a little rice hull cap to close it up. But
I love it.
it's been killing it. I couldn't be happier. It feels like not like bad because I wasn't throwing it out, but putting it out and like growing random shit like succulents and stuff in my side yard that I knew I could have been just, instead of buying more bags of it. I only ended up buying 2 before I started re-amending. So I was having it shipped from Michigan, which is definitely not the most economical I knew, but I had heard so much talk about it. I just really wanted to almost like test somebody else's. They were saying they're getting this amount of grams per watt off this type of lighting with these types of genetics. So I was like, hey, if you're getting that, if I can get anywhere close to what you're claiming, I'd be happy. And sure enough, they were right, in my opinion. So I think that they pushed me down the right path, and now I'm just re-amending it instead of buying fresh bags each time. And you can have a lot of success with re-amendment with so many different ways of attacking it. I mean, Keats mix has been very successful for lots of people. There's Indra who grows with basically, instead of worm castings, he loves bunny shit. So
which I am on that too, man. So if you love worm castings and you have bunny shit available, feed that to your fucking worms, and holy shit. Now you
can actually get that. There's bunny meat farms, which are a thing. They grow rabbits for meat, and when the rabbits poo, they often have worms underneath there to process the poop, and then they can sell that worm casting. So depending on where you're at, you can look locally and find it really, really cheap. Like people get like 20 pounds of it for damn near nothing if you go locally to them, but they're not going to like ship it to you. You got to go take it off their hands.
I would shovel that shit if they give it to me.
Now there's your one part.
Fuck yeah, dude.
If you want an inclusive one part, I've been listening, and there it is.
So part of the secret, if you look into Bad Bunny nutrients, shout out to another Michigan brand. I hear a ton of good stuff, and I've seen people have crazy good results with it. A bunny, when it eats their food, it actually often eats its own poop because it only digests it part way. And when they eat their poo, they get the rest of the nutrients out of it. So if you put them up on a sort of bedding or anything that allows the poo to drop through, and you collect it on the first run, basically where it's not eaten twice, it's much more nutritious. So if you feed that to your worms, then you're getting something that's like a really nutrient dense food for your plants. And that's basically as organic as you can come, depending on what you're feeding the rabbit.
And yeah, shout out to Bad Bunny Nutrients here in Michigan. You find them all over the place in different grow stores. HTG.
They're in Oklahoma now.
Yeah,
my bunny. I used to have a bunny, and it was hard to get first round poop from her because she just ate it. It was like her favorite snack.
It's probably
It's like
cat, easier to chew.
I want to shout out Rifa Mamacita. She has a guinea pig, and she was a new grower in organic, and she used her guinea pig. She would compost tea the poo, and she would fucking amend it into the soil, and she had great results with it. So, I mean, you can definitely get creative.
How many guinea pigs did she have, Jack?
I think it was just one, man. Like 1 or 2, maybe.
How much poop can a little guinea pig make? I mean, come on now.
When you clean the cage, instead of throwing it out.
Metabolism.
Is it amazing? I would be surprised.
Well,
does it just depend on how much you feed it?
I think it's a combination of both. The size of the guinea pig, how active it is, how much it's eating.
So I actually asked the Bad Bunny people what they fed their rabbits because I was interested, and they're feeding them mostly alfalfa hay. So that just makes, I was like, fuck yes. No wonder why it's so good. And you just basically, that's a high nitrogen input right there. And it's full of trichanthanol. I don't know if it survives, but I'm sure some of it does. And
I bet it does for sure. There's got to be some. And I wanted to say earlier, we did shout out Scotty Real. I do think that he makes some interesting and good products. I've had good experiences with Recharge, and Smash Cannabis, if I didn't already mention this, mentioned that he is looking for people to test that soil. So if you reach out to them, it's probably on dudegrows.com or Scotty Real, wherever. You might be able to test the soil instead of having to pay for it, and let us know how it works, because I don't like to slam a product I've never used, but I also don't like to give it a bunch of free press if it might end up being like something that's not the best. So curious to see how it unfolds.
I've used like I said, you can run it right through your worm bin. Works great. Or you could go straight. That's one of the ones. I think alpaca is another one. They call
Mr.
that.
Soul has alpacas for that reason, I think, because
you can go straight. You don't have to compost it. It's you can go straight on, and it won't burn your plants.
So it's just called a cold compost then, where it
you don't. You just it has to break down with time, to be plant available. But it does, with your microbes. But you don't have danger of burning it like you would like chicken manure. You can't go straight in with chicken manure. You're going to burn it's just going to burn your plants right up, just like a high, because it's so high in nitrogen.
I would wonder about deer, like deer compost or something, because where I lived in Ohio, I used to play paintball, and you would find piles, and it looks like bunny shit.
It looks a lot like it. Yeah, that's a good question. I bet alpaca looks the same way.
I wonder if there's like I don't mean to like be that guy, but like I wonder if some of them are inappropriate. Certainly, omnivore droppings tend to be a little bit.
Horse can be
anything
problematic
that eats
if you don't.
meat.
Have you heard about the deer that eat? There's been documented deer eating meat, squirrel,
Birds.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, there's video of them eating birds. Joe Rogan talked about it, and I looked into it. It's a thing.
Don't trust that poo, I'd say.
Yeah, omnivores.
Is that the one? The one from Plum Island?
I'm not sure where it was at, but I wanted to say I think horse manure is something that should always be composted if you're ever planning to use it. Some people, that's all they have available. It's local, and if they can compost that, it's a resource, and it's often free. If you show up with a truck, they'll let you take as much, or maybe they often have even like a minimum. You have to take a whole truckload or something. But it can be a way to build soil if you're doing like a large outdoor farm or greenhouse, and you don't want to put a ton of money into the inputs. You can be creative and try and make yourself your own compost if you're knowledgeable and do it right.
Or you can get your own you could, you'd make your own compost, but you get your own inputs pretty close to free if you have large vehicles and stuff, to be able to haul stuff.
Dude, horse poop is so easy. All you got to do is buy it, ask them how long it's been sitting. If it's a year, go ahead and use it. If it's less than a year, just let it sit somewhere near your wherever and let it sit for up to a year, and then it's ready to go generally.
I heard an interesting.
I'm looking up a short paper. Anyone who wants to look at it themselves can see. It's called "Pathogens Transmitted in Animal Feces in Low and Middle Income Countries," and they were saying that as for deer, hepatitis E, they're a deer for that, or deer are not uniquely a vector for that, as well as pigs and a few other things here.
Good find.
Yeah, just do a little bit of looking into it. I do agree with what Aaron is saying, though. Like if you process it, and Jack too, like if it's processed in some way, then I feel like it's a lot safer. And I think that's one of the things about like bioremediation in general is like the poorly named toilet tap, process. Like water gets around, and that's why processing is so important in some way or another.
Yeah, they say that we're drinking the same water that was like dinosaurs were pissing in all those years ago. The water cycle.
Hey, I got a question about the deer eating the animals. Is that like normal? Then they just realize it happening, or what's that all about?
Like an extreme hunger situation.
To my knowledge, it's not common. It's like they'll do it if it's needed, or
there's
if
no
they're
greenery
available.
around. They're starving.
Wow.
Yeah, a lot of animals will do that. They have like these stress eating responses, or like that's why like in laboratory tests for like biocontrols, super important to do like choice and no choice tests, because if you like, one way you can unfortunately bias your research is if you don't give the predatory mite, for example, or whatever, a choice between like maybe like what's known to be like its typical food source and like a different food source that you're trying it on. because if that other food source, the primary one, is abundant, then it might like 99% of the time only go after the other one and not
It's like,
actually
no,
be very good control.
this mouse prefers cocaine. I starved it to death, and it was eating so much
Yeah.
cocaine. Yeah.
Well,
Right.
with like the case of deer or even like a house animal, like if you have a cat that's never actually killed anything, it might not know what to do with like a bird that flies into your house. But the first time it kills a bird, then it's going to want to have an appetite for killing birds. Like they start seeing red. So that horse that ate a bird or a mouse or a squirrel or whatever it was, it might then start to eat meat because it knows like, oh, this is a way that I can get food. But typically they won't. There was even a case where there was horses that were fed cacti, the spineless cacti. Shout out to Luther Burbank, a cool breeder, a bunch of different things. But when they were raised on this cacti, they actually got so much water from eating the cacti that they didn't need to drink. So very often in this herd of horses, many of them wouldn't even drink water when presented it because they'd been so adequately hydrated by their diet. So it's definitely interesting animals' behavior. One thing I wanted to say, going back to the kind of aged manure of different animals, I heard a story a while ago of old chicken coop that somebody converted into a grow, and it was like 100-year-old chicken manure. And chicken manure is one thing that was always on my radar as kind of being hot, especially if it's like fresh, because in the early forum days, Subcool's super soil that we talked about, Vic High originally had chicken manure as part of his super soil mix that Subcool amended and later took out the chicken manure and changed the mix quite a bit. But I always sort of thought of it as being really hot. And then when I heard this story, it clicked to me that the age is definitely a big thing and what's happening in that time. Like, was it raining and like what else is going on? What kind of environment, heat, sunlight, oxygen, all those things factor in. And I guess they had a really killer grow with like some of the best flavors that they'd ever had. I think it might have been Breeder Steve, if I'm remembering correctly, but it was an interesting story. And I just wish I could pinpoint exactly who it was.
Dude, I used to year after year for probably 6 years straight, 5 years straight, grew in a pig pen. I knew a pig farmer, so he'd have his pigs he'd get them in the fall, and they'd have them all winter long, and then he'd get them. They'd really be butchered in the early part of the year, and then he'd go in and till it up, mix it all up so it wasn't super hot from the pigs, and we'd plant on it every year. That's where his grow was. And the deal I had with him was he had a 12, he could grow 12 plants here in Michigan. So he would let me have one of the plants, grow sometimes two. No, it was two. He'd let me grow two because it'd be on one end. So he'd let me grow 2 plants and he'd grow 10. And that was awesome. We always did really good. I didn't have to amend it much, or, I just sunk the pots halfway in the ground with some M3 in it and gave it water the whole season.
I'm happy that you at least said you use some M3 because I always get so jealous when I hear somebody, they're like, oh, I just planted right into the ground, killed it. Like their native soil was amazing. They had a ton of success. They're like, yeah, just fucking dropped a seed or a clone in the ground. Had amazing result. Like, if only it were that so easy for everyone.
Yeah, no kidding. I'm going to try to do that this year. Maybe I still haven't got them out. I got plenty of time though. I got some auto flowers I'm going to throw outside, I think, see what I can do with them.
I'm getting a little bit excited. My barber that I taught to grow, he's getting really excited about the idea of getting into hemp cultivation. And I just love growing under the sun, like getting plants out, whether it's cannabis or anything else. The sun is, like, in my opinion, the best grow light. I don't think anybody's matched it yet or found a better spectrum. So it's really awesome to see whether you're in a greenhouse or full sun. Cannabis is expression. And I haven't worked a lot with hemp, I'll be perfectly honest. But Matthew turned me on to a group locally here in San Diego called Cultivaris Hemp that actually has some good looking hemp buds, like locally to me, like really, really close to me. So it's cool that I'll be able to have access to some clones that I know in this area will test below a certain percent. And I can also start to breed and mess around and make seeds and just have fun with it. It's getting out under the sun and not having plant counts is definitely seems exciting, even if it's just for CBD and CBN and CBG and those types of things.
One of the first things I noticed growing them outside over growing them inside was how they track the sun. It's like they don't fucking move around like that in inside, but outside they'll fucking follow the sun. I mean, they'll be facing due east, and then at the end of the day they're facing all due west. They follow the damn sun, man. So I love shit like that, man. Just the little things you notice.
I watched that last night. I was playing cornhole at my little neighborhood, just a few people, and there was a sunflower, and you could literally watch it following the sun as the sun was going down, and then after the sun went down, it just like drooped, and it was like it's a huge it's only probably 3 feet tall, but it's the actual type of sunflower it is. The head of it is bigger than my head, so it's pretty dramatic when you see it, and it's just like the one kind of tracking it, and it's really
Yeah.
cool to see that kind of stuff.
I've seen
Sounds
a
like those
field time
mammoth
lapse.
sunflowers.
I've seen a field of sunflowers time lapse doing that. It's wild because like the whole entire field, all the heads move with the sun. It's crazy.
I love time lapse for that. Even like cannabis growing, when you see it like the seedling like spiraling up, like you just wouldn't think until you see that time lapse video that like, oh, like maybe that's like the wind blowing it or the Earth's rotation or something. I don't know, but it's cool to see it's not just growing like straight up as one person might think. So we've definitely touched on the organic one-part nutrient mix, and originally I was going to do this episode and call it Coco versus, because I was hoping Coco for Cannabis, Dr. MJ would be here, and I wasn't going to do it as like a Coco versus soil, like this is better than that, but more like how does Coco compare as a media to soil or hydroponics or other things, just like how it handles. And I think it'd still be a good topic despite him not being here, because we have Spartan who grows in cocoa at work and has organic experience at home. I've grown in cocoa. I think a few of the other panel members here have as well. And just anybody who's grown in other media can say like, this is how it works for me in seedling or veg and in flower. And so I guess I'll throw it to Spartan first and see what are your thoughts about just some of the differences at the early stages, like starting from seedling.
So for me, it's two different ways of growing, and it's two different mindsets. And where the biggest difference is watering. One, I don't want to go into the big lengthy detail of that at this point, but if we want to get back into it later, we can. But once you figure out the watering of each side and then compare them to each other as far as how the growth and everything, you're going to be watering more with the cocoa. But the benefit of that, or the trade-off for your labor there is that you get increased growth. You get increased growth rates throughout all the way. I feel maybe not like cloning. I mean, if you take a clone off of a plant in cocoa versus a plant in soil, I think that clone rate is similar. I don't see a huge difference there. But pretty much every other aspect, once the roots hit the media, I believe that the cocoa, I mean, the plants that I see every day at work, thousands at a time, over and over and over again. And it's just sometimes, I mean, it's obviously strain specific, but sometimes it's just amazing to me the rate of growth that can be seen. And that's just
Is there a major flavor difference if it's the same strain, grown in cocoa versus living soil that you notice?
Dude, I was just thinking the same thing.
It's not a fair.
That's why we have the same last name.
Yeah, I can't give a fair. I can't give a fair. I'll give you an answer. Yes, if I were to answer your question, if I were to take a clone from work and grow it in mine, I believe that it would taste better. I don't believe that it would be a huge difference, but I believe it'd be a difference that I would be able to tell. Now, that being said, the plants at home get far more attention per plant than the plants at work. And I also have help at work. So, I mean, it's not exactly a scientific experiment there. I mean, two different environments, you know what I mean? And,
But do you feel like the plant that's going to get the better care? Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, what I would have to do is take a third cut and grow it in, the same, in cocoa, right? And do that to have a true side by side. And I haven't done that. So, I can't give you a true answer there myself, but that's as close of an answer I can give you there.
Two questions. One question: what kind of nutrient line would you recommend to a cocoa grower? Because see, that's the thing. Like I'm just basically trying to start over again. I'm just trying to learn everything about this that I know I can always do what I'm doing. And I'm going to keep doing it on the side here, but I'm trying to just do everything new. And I'm going to do the cocoa thing. I'm obviously going to talk to Dr. MJ about it, but I'm just curious what kind of nutrients would you use in cocoa? And then my second question is, what? And I hate to be that guy. Like, you never hear me say this, but if you got the 2 clones, like you said, from work, and one was in cocoa and one was in your soil, which one would yield more?
Coco, for sure.
Okay.
I think it'll be close though, because Eagle Gardens grows in cocoa, and he just did a side by side with an earth box, and his yield actually was much larger in his soil earth box than it was with the cocoa. And he's been growing cocoa for years and years and years. Smiley's garden came over with the earth box, set it all the way up for him, basically, so he just has to fill it up with water. And same lights, they're all grown under 1,000 watt HPS in 4x8 tents, side by side, and you watched it grow behind him. He had a live show every single night, and you could literally see him. The earth box was just healthier. So I think he didn't have his cocoa dialed in as well as some people could, and the soil was really dialed in that instance. Whereas Spartan's situation, the cocoa is dialed in as fuck. It's professionally done by a team of caregivers who all actually really give a fuck. They built it from the ground up with the best equipment they could afford at the time. They set it up with really good due diligence, and they have a team that cares.
With the environments. I mean, that environment there is in fucking. I mean, we got that in check, and it's checked by 4 or 5 people all the time. Where this environment, I don't even have a monitor. So, I mean, I got the regular, temperature, humidity, all that good shit, but I don't have a 24. I can't pull up my phone. I don't have that yet.
The beauty is you can still grow more dank bud with your non-regulated 24-hour checked environment than they can in that large environment. And I think that does go to what Matthew mentioned earlier. The care per plant is meant as good as you guys do at Mechanico. And hats off to you guys. The numbers don't lie. The photos, I haven't smelled it or smoked it yet, but from what I'm hearing, there's a lot of good stuff. But I do think that home growers should kind of have like a little notch in their belt to realize we can grow some of the best shit on the planet. And I think that's like undeniable when you've smoked, at least I've been able to smoke some of the best buds from the best growers, like in the legal markets and the illicit markets. So some people, the shit that people grow in their closet is often some of the best shit you'll come across.
Some stresses will increase THC too, that, they won't have those stresses in a dialed perfect environment. And Brandon Russ doesn't use any cocoa, or does he?
No, he's all
because he's got some killer. It appears as though he would have some killer yields that might, compete against all cocoa grow. And I think that's up for debate, especially when you get someone like Brandon Rust having it organic so dialed in.
I would say I would give the edge to cocoa, but when they're both really dialed in, I'd say it's pretty close. I think that cocoa grows faster, so you have to veg for a shorter period of time.
Yeah, it's easier in cocoa to achieve better yields. I would say that probably is undeniable because, I mean, I haven't done it personally, but like all you need is the right nutrients and water, and you're there with the cocoa pretty much.
I've done it personally, and I've helped like 100 people growing cocoa using Dr. MJ's list on his website, where you just say, here is a recommendation where if you keep it between 1.2 and 1.4 EC in veg, and he uses what's the General Hydroponics, pretty inexpensive liquid line. He believes that the powder nutrients are difficult for some of the newer growers to mix. But if I was going to recommend to you, Noah, I really like Jack's 321 for the cost. Some people like Floraflex and what's the other big one? But yeah, there's a bunch of different lines for cocoa. I just wouldn't recommend Advanced Nutrients because there's a bunch of different bottles and it gets really, really expensive.
Athena is the other dry nutrient line.
Athena's a good one for sure.
Don't use Power Side with Athena if you're going to use Athena. It has its own silicate. There's people that try to throw Power Side in and it fucks it all, like clouds all up, and you know what I mean, falls out of solution and stuff.
So it's like Heavy 16. If you use their roots, I used Heavy 16 when I was in Coco, which is a liquid line, but they have the basically Power SI product in their roots product line, and it's like 1 milliliter per gallon or whatever, and it has the basically fancier, more expensive, more available potassium silicate, maybe, or not potassium silicate. It's a monosilicic acid or something like that.
Yep, monosilicic.
What do you guys think about the Power side?
We use it at work. Works good. It's expensive.
I'd say it works well. It's not needed, but it's
effective. Use a lot. It's that's the thing. It is expensive, just like Mammoth P. It's expensive, but you're not using a lot. It lasts a little bit longer than what you imagine it will.
Yeah, like I think it's a 1 milliliter per gallon, and like if you get a little
0.5 is what we use in veg. And then
Yeah, so there you go. I mean, then those tiny little 250 milliliter bottles, like the baby ass little sample bottle, that means that mixes 500 gallons of water. So that's a pretty good amount. So the cost is expensive, but like you said, it'll last a while because you're using very little. And I'd consider it like Mycos. Like you can use a little bit of it, and I think you get a good effect out of it. A lot of people choose to skip out on that, and a lot of people will pull up research papers and say, well, Jack, Mycos doesn't form a relationship until this amount of days and this amount of time. And I'm just like, I've just done too many side by sides and seen the much happier plants be the one in the transplant. Like if I just forgot to spoonful one of my transplants out of like the 7, that one looks way shittier than all the rest of them. And it's just like,
well, it could be. That's the thing, is everybody's so focused on the plant, and it's like, what about what the fungi does to the fucking soil? What, improves the tilt of the soil, holds more moisture. There's a million things. So maybe it didn't make that handshake yet with the plant root, but it's still in the soil. It's still spreading mycelium across and making that network. It's still working in the soil. So people got to make that connection. The plant's connected to the soil. So what happens in the soil? Well, I'm saying soil, but media. So
yeah,
you have
because
to
technically
remember.
Brandon's
That's
is
a
like a
good point,
soil-less, right? Because like there's no sand, silt, or clay, but it's technically treated like a soil because how we're feeding, we're treating. A lot of people say feed the soil, not the plant. You're giving that soil some of the mycos, and I didn't even really consider that Spartan, to be honest. But the impact it has on just like drainage, even like looking at the granular nature of it, it's going to change the nature of the soil depending on how much you're using. It doesn't need to be a bunch, and I found when it has root contact, it's a lot more effective than when it doesn't have root contact. But that's definitely something I think people suggest. I've seen people put it in like salt shakers, which I think is a cool way to disperse it where you're not using too much at one time. The one thing I haven't used a bunch of is the Azos, which I see a lot of people really like, and they use that in combination. But it's just one of those things I need to
I
stop being
think
cheap.
one replaces the other. I think if you use both, you're doing the wrong thing. I think one is for
No,
one
that's not
application and
true.
one's for the
No,
other. So one's for the soil and one's
that's
for the spray. Well, I don't know what the difference is. There's
I
a
think
difference.
the
no,
Azos
that's
helps
not true.
nitrogen uptake.
Yeah,
And then,
ASOS is a nitron. Oh,
go ahead, Tal.
I'm sorry. Yeah, just hold on one second. All right. Azos is a bacteria, and Mycos is a fungus. And Azos is, like you're saying, a nitro, and I believe it's a nitrogen fixer, but they recommend you use it for cloning. But there's white papers how the Azos helps assist the fungi to penetrate the roots also and get into roots. And they're symbiotic too. All of it together is good.
Shout out to Mendo Dope. They use both of them, and they're probably sponsored by Extreme Gardening. But there's a bunch of different products out there that make Azos and Mycos are just extreme gardening products. Mycos is short for mycorrhizal fungi, and I think it's the endophytic or not endo. What's the? There's a new term for it.
Epiphytic.
Yeah, but what they stopped calling it mycorrhizal fungi. Maybe there's another term. I could be.
It was Glomerulus
Glomulus.
enteriaceae, and now it's
That's what it was.
rhizophagy
Yeah,
enteriaceae, I think.
but myco, right? But like those are different. One's a species term, the other's like a functional ecology term. But they can
Could
be
you
both of those
explain
things.
that for the layman out there?
Yeah, so like mycorrhizae, for example, or technically mycorrhizas, some would argue, it's just a term that refers to a particular group of like fungi, and there's a bunch of different kinds, and they do different things, and there's like and certain, so like it's classification at the end of the day. In some cases, in fact, I have a few posts on my Instagram about subjects like these, and in my global cannabis IPM review video, I go over this too, that like the way that we have classified mycorrhizae in general in the past is sometimes criticized because it's sort of like it's like morphology based instead of like phylogenomically or like sort of like how everything kind of relates to each other genetically, like like all the cats and the felidae and all the dogs and the all the canines, and that kind of a thing. So but you were saying like, and I was saying words like epiphyte, endophyte, those are just terms that like kind of describe where they exist in the phyte in the plant. So endophyte means inside the plant. Epiphyte means like on the surface of the plant. So like endo and ectomycorrhizae are like those that can enter into the plant to some degree, and those that kind of stay on the surface of the plant root system, right? And so things
Endo is
can
the
be
one.
mutually exclusive or have both of those traits, is essentially what I'm saying.
Endo's the one I usually hear pushed in the cannabis space, but do they both have the ability to make the relationship with cannabis, or is one better or worse than the other?
Well, I think that well, see, this is the sort of thing where like it's not like it's unuseful to broadly describe or broadly talk about typically species in this way, like endo versus ecto, because the more we learn about it, the more that we find that there's more exceptions to the rules, and kind of makes referring to them broadly is like not helpful, if that makes sense. Because I think most, and here I'm going to commit that sin right here, because in my head I think that it's usually the case that ectomycorrhizal fungi are typically associated with like a lot of like tree species, and that's a very broad kind of answer. Whereas I
Yeah,
think
and
there's a
that's
lot more endomycorrhizae that are like
vegetable related.
well, I was trying like herbaceous plants. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And even
like
then, that term herbaceous is sort of a fuzzy, arbitrary term.
So I always found it weird that Great White, that product, offered endo and ecto, and that people were claiming that endo was all you needed for cannabis. Yet I saw just, this was in my synthetic days, that I saw such great results with the Great White, having it be, you know, multi-species. That I think that variance was the key, like you're saying, Matt. Like those particular species not necessarily being endo or ecto, but just particular species having particular functions.
I
do
knew
Yeah,
that.
some
like
of those
the Azospirillum brasiliniaceae is the
right.
azos that we're talking about, that bacteria.
Yep.
And you know, certain bacteria on a post recently, or I just posted today, we were talking about like Fusarium and Pythium, and somebody had asked me why it is that like Pseudomonas is found in like biopesticides or biological supplements for plants, whereas when he's washing his hands and he's hearing about all these terrible pathogens, Pseudomonas is also you know, a pathogen of humans and things that we're worried about. Why is that? Well, it's because Pseudomonas, the genus, has tons of different species, and sometimes even the same species can be a pathogen or beneficial to a plant or a human in different contexts. So it's very nuanced and complex, and it's not good enough to say something like, "Oh, this will get rid of all the bad bacteria." Like that doesn't that does when you that doesn't make sense as a statement of fact
It seems like it's
based on what I just said.
too early to even understand the full science of it, and it's too easy to oversimplify. So using statements like that is like painting with too broad of a brush. But the American one over here has his hand up, so I want to get to him, and then next I'll let Spartan Grown jump in because it sounded like he had something he wanted to say there too. The American one.
Yeah, I was going to say, and comment and question about the endo and ecto. It's like so cannabis only makes a relationship with the endo fungus, but the ecto, I don't know if any of that breaks down nutrients, but some of that fungi will not only break down nutrients that are in the soil, but when they die, they become nutrients for your plants as well. So I think that might have something to do with it. I know, I'm pretty damn sure the Pseudomonas is definitely a nutrient releasing fungus of some sort. So that could be why it's in a lot of products as well. And even now, all the products I see have both pretty much.
I won't say too much here because I want other people to be able to speak, but I just want to say that um, we don't know enough about the cannabis microbiome, and I think that we know a little bit, and I think there's some research that sort of points to more of an effect and more of a relationship, but um, yeah, I think that there's a lot more to it, and that we should be cautious about what we only need and what that would even mean in like a cultivation context. And that's it.
That's a great point. Spartan, did you want to jump in there?
Yeah, the only thing I was going to add was when Aaron was talking about the Great White, and I can't remember. I know it's Intrasades, but I don't remember the first part. Maybe it was a Galamus, but it was one of the ones that they actually found when they pulled up cannabis plants and looked at the roots. It was one of the ones they actually found actually did make a relationship with cannabis. I read that in a paper, and then I went looking through products, and one of the products that had it was Recharge, and the other was Great White.
And this was an ectophytic, or
I don't remember. I just remember. I remember it was a big deal because it was the only fungi, so it had to have been the ecto because it was like it was the only one they found that had made the actual relationship with the root.
well, it's probably the endo then. I think.
Yeah.
Those are the most common.
Dynamico is supposedly engineered their product for cannabis only. So you could look at those ingredients and make some sort of, I don't know.
Clearly,
Yeah.
there's some private research going on that they're not really telling us what they're doing, but they're figuring shit out and then making products about it.
And like
What do you
Matt
think?
says, it's really complicated. They'll never know probably all the little intricacies for a long ass time. But I'm sorry.
Yeah,
What do
I
you
would hate
think
for,
about
like,
the
a
Great White
markup.
product, Aaron?
It's great, but it's really overpriced.
That's kind of what I thought.
I create, and the other thing is you can use stuff like that. You can use a pinch, and my understanding is it sort of procreates in your soil. So, if you reuse an organic soil, buy a jar of it and never look back.
Awesome.
Yeah, I just feel like if somebody's going to make the statement that like you only need this product of ours that has all the good stuff that you need, at this point in understanding of cannabis microbiome, I'm gonna say maybe it's a little hasty.
Shenanigans, yeah.
That's why I really like all the organic soil approach, because if you come at it with so many different amendments you've got 6 sources of calcium and 3 sources of nitrogen and all these different options for the microbes and the plant to make these relationships with and take up whatever it wants. Like for a while, we thought when we first started learning about growing with nutrients that it needed, 10 nutrients like NPK plus a few micros, and then they thought 17, and then it was 33, and now there's like 54, and now there's 77. And it's like if you just look at kelp, there's like I think 70 to 80 different things within that, maybe hundreds, and things that the plant are taking up that are available in certain plants that we know about, maybe potential inputs or things that are going to be a nutrient to that. Like cannabis is very early in the understanding, so I think that, like Matthew said, anybody who's claiming to know 100% of what it needs right now might be a little on the early end. Kyle says I have to spend some time with my. Okay, I'm not going to read the rest of the message, but Kyle, I wanted to give you a chance to jump in and let you speak for a little bit if you have any final thoughts before you want to get heading out.
Yeah, man, I just want to say, I still really appreciate what we're all doing here, man. I'm glad, even though I'm sure we all have things going on in our life, that we're still able to come here and still do this, and maybe hopefully we can do this for many more years, and random news. I did do an interview with Growcast on Friday, which I don't do well in interviews, but we'll see how that goes. So he's going to air that. Yeah, so that's pretty cool. And other than that, I'm just again, I'm just really happy everyone's doing well. If anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out. I do communicate. And so I have Feminized Seeds. If there's a website, there's a link in my bio. It's the letter P followed by breeding.com, and predicative breeding on all social media platforms. And I hope everyone's doing well, and I'll see you guys on Sunday.
Definitely look forward to seeing you next week, Kyle. And I think you don't give yourself enough credit, man, with your interview skills. I listened back to some of the Breeders Collectives when I found out Stitcher had all of the old Cheap Home Grow podcasts archived. And on some of those Breeders Collectives, you dropped some real gems for anybody who wants to get into breeding, even making their own feminized seeds. Kyle basically gives you his whole recipe and his experience with when to spray, how much to spray, concentrations, the difference between silver thiosulfate and colloidal silver, whole bunch of really, really just, in my opinion, gems for the cannabis community. And I'm really thankful that you put that out there for everybody. And you have a lot more knowledge than you give yourself credit for. And I think you're a great addition to this panel, and the Growcast will be thankful that they had you on.
Thank you, Jack. I really appreciate that. Thanks, guys. Take care.
Peace out, Kyle. And yeah, your plants are looking mighty frosty, dude, across the IGs. I see more of your rock candy and stuff, dude. Good work.
I was just looking at Kyle's page the other day. It looked like some of your organic soil stuff was looking awesome, man. Good job.
Yeah, shout out to Roots Organic. I just switched. So apparently they ran an M3, so I'm using this is my first round with Roots Organic Lush soil. So I don't know how it's gonna go, but so far they seem pretty good. And from my experience, the first thing that I ever had deplete in any of it is CalMag. right off the bat. Usually after like a week, some of the plants that are a little on the hungrier side, I have CalMag deficiencies. So I just add like a couple splash and they bounce right back. But yeah, I appreciate it, guys. Things are getting there, and I am supposed to be getting some pollen from Green Bodie at the beginning of this week, and some other things going on. I have that GMO by Root Beer Cut. Me and Brendan are are in the middle of some things, so there should be some really good stuff for the community, because I've been basically riding on the same gear for a while now. So it's invigorating that something new is coming to the market. So, but yeah, thanks again, you guys. I appreciate it, man. Take care.
Have a good one, Kyle. I just want to give you one tip before you go. Green sand is the organic CalMag for anybody who's looking. Green sand is literally calcium and magnesium. So that's a replacement. But I would honestly think that gypsum will probably work a lot better for you. LED grown organic plants so often turn yellow, and I think it's very often the calcium. And a little bit of gypsum goes a long way. And the last thing I'll say is
Gypsum
the
and
terp tea.
langbonite.
Go light on the terp tea.
Gypsum and
use that.
langbonite equals organic CalMag.
Yeah.
Can you just top dress with that stuff? That's
Yeah.
fine.
Yep.
It's like it looks like a salt.
Yep. Yeah. Don't tell the organic guys.
Yeah. Right. All right. Love y'all. Take care, man.
Take care.
Another good one is worm castings will help with calcium anyway. They're kind of coated in calcium. So that's why I always
Seems like worm castings help with everything.
Yeah, that's why I always throw fucking worm castings at shit. But I feed my worms a good fucking diet. It's not like I'm just fucking feeding them just shit. They get shit, but they also get like a little sprinkle of BioLive or Craft Blend or whatever I got. They get a little bit of fucking barley in there.
So you guys were talking about silica earlier, right? Power Psi and all that.
Yeah.
I had a thought, but I guess I didn't get to chime in, but it just came to my mind. We are the cheap home grow, right? So what's the cheapest way to get silica? A little bit of plant ferment, man. Just go rip up some dandelions and some milk thistle, throw it in a bucket and coat it with water, let it sit for a month, stir it once a week. It's ready in a month, dude. And use it in a 1:50 ratio. I'm about to feed that in a few days, because once a year I do that and plants love it.
Also, vermiculite in your soil mix. That's in the M3. And once I started growing in M3, I've grown in soil in the past. We didn't use vermiculite or large amounts of what would provide silica to the plant. And since I started growing in the M3, it's like I could bend my plant basically all the way down to the soil from any part of the plant at most stages until like much, much later when it becomes woody. But it's amazing how pliable you can get with the right amount of vermiculite. I think it gives that plant a good stability, and just something about the cells, like they'll bend but not snap as much in my experience.
The vermiculite, you gotta be careful. It looks like perlite, but it doesn't work the same. It kind of holds water.
It almost, people think it's like heavy metal, I think sometimes, or maybe there's something else in the M3. Maybe that, I think it's the, God, what was it? Here's the mix. Okay. It could be the rock phosphate. There's little like flakes of rock phosphate in there. And people think that there's like heavy metals in the soil because they see these, what looks like tiny little pieces of metal, but it's tiny little pieces of rock. And if you've seen certain rocks, they're like reflective, like a fool's gold almost look to it. And they see it shining in their soil and they're like, what the hell is that? And Spartan, with the whole comment you made earlier with your reamendment, I think what I've done to, because the perlite eventually will break down into like sand or get crushed or float to the top over time, I use Brandon's kind of strategy of 10% rice hulls and 30% pumice. So like 40% of the mix, I try and make aeration. So that way I can water a little bit more frequently and not be like punished for it, I guess. Sometimes in soil, the soil can get a little bit waterlogged. And I found if you want your plants to grow close to as fast as they can grow in cocoa, in my experience, you have to give them a little bit more aeration. So that way you can keep getting water in there. Because what you were going to say earlier, or what you said earlier about the hungrier plant, what I noticed with the M3 is if you like wait longer between waterings, like the less hungry plants will do fine, but the hungrier plants, like they want to be watered almost more often. So if I gave them like less water, but more frequently, it made the nutrients in the soil available, so to speak. So then they would be able to make it through the run without needing anything additional, like a top dress or a larger pod or any additional things to the soil mix.
Yeah, for sure. I've noticed that the easiest way to say is if you let them dry out, they do worse in a sip. So what I like to do, what I mean by not the sip container itself, but to be past the sip container to where the media dried out. If you let the media dry out, then it's a bad thing in a sip situation. So the way that I try to time like I say, I'm not perfect, but the way I try to time my waterings is that the container, the res, I guess we'll call it, is dry right when I'm ready to water it. Like it doesn't stay, the res itself won't stay dry for more than, 8 hours at the very most. It's probably likely going to be at the very I mean, I usually will water again when I see like just the very littlest amount of water at the bottom. So it's very often that it doesn't happen, but yeah, for sure. Sometimes it'll be dry. And, those ones that are really beasting out tend to be the ones that are drinking the most, which makes sense because as the water passes through the plant, that's where it's picking up the minerals.
It has the strongest root system that's most able to take the water up into the plant. I found, like you said, within 12 hours, if I push it past 12 hours on a dry back with the sip, then you start to notice slowed growth, and it doesn't like it when it gets dried out. But with the M3, one of the things that I watched a bunch of YouTube videos before I tried it, and the guy himself, Swan, or one of the people over at Michigan Made Mix, he was talking about when you first transplant in, especially with like a smaller root ball, like he likes to err on the side of like watering lightly, I would say, and like he doesn't fully saturate the soil the first time. And I actually think that's a good idea for people that are going to use that kind of mix, because if you do, I think it's a little bit too hot. It might take too long for it to dry out, and you'll have this really soggy pot sitting there for quite a while. So there are definitely some tips and tricks with the M3. It isn't the most new grower friendly, I'll say, because it is, I would say it tends to be a little bit too hot for some stuff, in my case. But what I wanted to mention about the drying out, I only have a sip for my flower plants. So in veg, I start in a solo cup, and then I go into a 1 gallon easy swap pot. And at that point, I've noticed you really have to make sure you're not watering again too soon with the M3. It might seem like it's dry, like you could pick it up and almost feels light, but if the plants are looking good, until the bottom sets the leaves, I think sometimes start to droop in like the smaller pots, I won't water again, because sometimes like if I think like, oh, the top little quarter inch of soil is dry, I water again, then they just like all the leaves are super drooped and they look like really swole up with water, like, oh, we got it a little bit too early, and almost looking like it's overwatered. So definitely like to get it into the sip as soon as possible, because it takes the guesswork out of the watering. And I'm even considering doing like a little tray for my veg. Just throw down some, I don't know, what are the little like,
rock or the little
even pumice might work.
Pumice, yeah, any of that stuff.
Yeah, so pumice underneath and then just bottom water. So they like to say butt chugging over at the Frugal Forest and Michigan Bros Grow Show. It's funny how many people got into it.
I might do the same thing. I was just thinking I'll be able to do. I have it's a 2x4 tray. I'll be able to squeeze it in there, and I could just put. I think I have a bag of hydrogen balls, fucking somewhere, and I could just dump that in there, and put all my 1 gallons in there.
That's what I'm gonna do with I have like a 50 cell clone tray, and I use that for my solo cups and my 1 gallons. It can fit 3 easy swap 1 gallons like sideways. So that's like my little veg space. So I'm definitely learned something new for this show that I'm going to implement in the garden this week, and hopefully it'll make life a little bit easier. And I think the one thing that I would caution with that is it's only really going to be effective, I guess, maybe once the roots are close enough to the bottom of the pot that it can wick up, potentially. But if it's got enough sidewall, I guess it can wick the water up naturally with the like fabric pot.
Yeah. Yeah, you might have to top water a little bit, but who cares if you don't have to worry about catching the runoff. It's already in a tray, right? So
yeah, it acts like an organic hempy at that point, where you've just like, if it has runoff, you don't have to worry about chop backing it out or having anything go on like that. So good thoughts there. I've even seen some people put a little bit of a layer in the bottom of their pot to make like that action. Hydroton is usually what they use at that point. Just like the bottom, maybe quarter inch or inch.
I've done that in my what was that? Autopot says I had an Autopot 9 tray. I'm not using it now because the plant counts, but I love to be able to do 9 plants in a 4x4. It was fucking amazing. But yeah, I had to do like an inch maybe of that in the bottom of each pot there to make them not struck. Because the first time I just went straight soil all the way through, and it kept them waterlogged, I thought, and the plants kind of struggled a little bit. And then the next run I put in, like I said, like an inch of the hydrogen, and it was just way better. It made all the difference.
That's the perfect solution for that style of a system. It's unfortunate with plant counts, like because organics, if plant count were an issue, that's one of the things where if it's vegging a little bit slower, you could just run more plants, and then you don't have to veg it as long, and then you can get the same canopy off of more plants with less veg time. I've noticed for myself personally, cocoa from seed, like from the day I sprout the seed to flipping to flower, could be as short as like 25 to 30 days, where in soil I'm usually like 35 to 45 days. So it's a couple extra days in veg, but for most people that isn't a huge deal, especially if you're perpetual. You've just like got that light running anyway. So the veg space, it's like however long it takes, and as soon as you've got space open up in flower, so you can definitely accommodate for the few drawbacks. And like we were talking about earlier, I definitely think it can hit similar yields, but I didn't want to make this like a versus like one's better or the other or whatever. It's kind of gone into that a little bit, as I think people always assume flavor is going to be better in organics. I will say, as an organic grower and an organic advocate, I've had really shitty tasting organic bud. It tasted like actual cow manure, or it tasted like dirt, and it wasn't supposed to. It was like, oh, this is that purple punch, man. It's super fruity. And it's like, dude, this tastes like fucking dirt. Like it smells like dirt. It's like funky, like a dank basement that's moldy, like not in a good way. And there's some bad organic bud out there. Just because you switch to soil and grow an organic doesn't mean your bud's going to magically all of a sudden taste amazing. You have to pick good genetics, you have to grow the plant well, you have to have a good soil mix, and you have to dry and cure it properly, or else it's going to be just as bad or worse than other people's product that do take those steps. I grew in Coco and I had some really tasty ass bud. Nobody ever said, hey, is this hydroponically grown? They're all like, shit, this tastes fucking amazing. This is really good. And the line that I was running, the website I was documenting my grow on, considered it organic. Like I didn't even put my stuff in the organic section, but they're like, oh, you're using a nutrient line that we consider organic. So it's just there's 100 different ways to go about doing it. And don't be sold by anybody on whether it's the show or another show that you can only do things one way, because there's definitely a whole bunch of different ways to have success growing cannabis.
Yeah, and as far as cocoa peat, both can be organic. They're both organic, right? Cocoa doesn't become inorganic until you start pouring something inorganic through it. But I really am a fan of peat because it turns acidic in time, and the water, my input water that I get, is basic. So it works out pretty good in my stance, because on my, you know how I was saying I have that one that's into the fourth run now. I've started not even pHing it down anymore with my Alaskan fish fertilizer. I've been just letting it ride at the little higher pHs, and they're fucking loving it. So it must be compensating for that that little acidity as that peat ages.
Definitely, it's interesting to consider. I actually don't. I'm one of those guys who doesn't pH. My tap pH is really consistent. I add some stuff in there occasionally that will throw off the pH so much that I don't want to look at it. Like I think Brandon's Micro Plus would probably make the pH at some range that I probably wouldn't feel comfortable pouring it into my soil if I looked at it. But then when I pour it into my soil, my plants look really fucking happy. I'm just like, hey, I'm just gonna go with it. Like I trust. I see what he's doing. He's having a lot of success with it. I've looked into a lot of the research that he's posted and provided in regards to the effective microorganisms and how they work with soilless mixes. And he's seeming to have bunches of success, and so many other people are. My plants seem to love it as well. So pH, I don't think it can be scary for some people, but it matters for sure. Like some people are like, oh, it doesn't matter. I'll pour 9 pH in my shit and the microbes will buffer it. But I'm with Spartan on, I think you're taking energy away from maybe like those microbes could have just used their energy to go get nutrition for the plant, but now they're trying to change the water and adjust their pH to maintain homeostasis.
I mean, I like to at least be in the range, at least, what is it, 5.5 to 6.5? Give me that's a broad ass range. It's you should be able to hit that pretty fairly easily.
Yeah, my water is like 5.9 to like 6.2, like every single time I tested it. So I'm not super worried about it, and it's pretty clean. The one thing people worry about is chlorine and chloramine. Humic acid completely nullifies that. So if you're having issues with chlorine or chloramine, and I think Spartan has even said like the bacteria off your arm, if you just stick it in a bucket of water, is enough to nullify the chlorine. I'm not sure about chloramine on that one though.
Yeah, I don't know
Something
about the
comes to
chlorine.
mind here when you guys are talking pH. Nitrogen is only available between 6.7 and 7.3, I think. I want to say. So my soil, I generally keep between 6.7 and 6.9, but you guys are saying 5.5 and 6.5. Is that non-living soil or living soil?
I'd
Well,
consider it like a soilless. It's technically a soilless mix because we're not adding. I think there is some clay, but I'm not adding sand or silt. But that might be considered like some of the rock phosphate and things like that.
What's-
I was just given a broad range for all the way down to Coco 5.5 and all the way up to where
I know, and the hydro guys run it so low, and I'm just wondering how the nitrogen is available.
What's the
think this is
pH of
like-
rainwater?
What's that?
Does anybody
pH of rainwater?
rainwater?
It depends on where you're at.
you're at. Yeah.
Okay. Well, plants grow outside, and whatever that pH is, got to be close to.
They love
what
that
they can
atmospheric
accept.
nitrogen, Tao. There's a lot of
Yeah.
atmospheric nitrogen that's coming in with that rainwater. It's falling
But
through.
it's still a certain pH, though. You know.
That probably is. I would guess that rainwater has a relatively consistent range, but we need Jamie or somebody like Joe Rogan over here to Google this shit up on the slide.
there's acid
Yeah, we
rain.
need like a judge who were like, all right, can we get fact checked on this?
If there's pollution,
Well, let me do that,
acid
maybe.
rain, so it could be very acidic.
Yeah, like if you're in LA and like when the smog era was, that rain's going to be different than like if you're in Colorado mountains where you got like fresh ass mountain air. And if there's been a thunderstorm, there's ozone in the air, right? So it's different than if there wasn't lightning striking and things like that.
So a cursory Google search tells me that clean rain is between 5 and 5.5. Now, some places it could be more acidic and maybe more basic, but for those who thought it would be just the same as, like pure water or whatever, like at 7.
That
Not
was
so much, it
surprising.
looks
It's
like.
more acidic than I thought.
And I'm sure it changes by the time it gets to the roots a little bit, right? Going through
Right,
some-
yeah, that's the
a
other
little
factor.
bit, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of what we're talking about with the microbes or whatever is buffering it in the soil. I mean, like lime or whatever people use, they can contact that and immediately begin to have a chemical change.
Got the microbes in
Yeah.
the air buffering it. So where are they measuring this pH? At the cloud or at the ground or under the soil?
That's a good question. It's a US EPA page. So like I know some people aren't going to be a big fan of that. Yeah, I don't know. This is me also committing one of my own sins, which is to not cite your source. I'll put the link in there, but I could find probably a better, more comprehensive thing if we really cared too much about it.
It's definitely interesting. I talked to a farmer who runs cattle on my land, and I said, how do you, this grass needs nitrogen. How do you supply it nitrogen? He said, it's going to snow next week. The snow brings atmospheric nitrogen down for the hay that's, or for the grass. That's enough. And that just blew my mind. So when somebody mentioned atmospheric nitrogen.
Jack was saying that. Like as the water falls in the rain.
Yes. Yeah. And the snow apparently
greens up after rain.
Yeah. Farmers depend on that. Like it's real. That's how they
free water
fertilize
too.
their field. Yeah.
It's free water. Water is expensive, especially in California. So if we get rain, it's a big deal. And it has nitrogen in it. It's like free fertilizer. Like if you look at the composition
That's
of
wild.
oxygen or of like the atmospheric.
70% or something.
So here's
Yeah,
the
80,
dude. Here's the
yeah.
mind fuck, right? If the rain is 5.5, but it's bringing nitrogen down, how is that nitrogen even available to the plants?
Dude, those pH ranges are best guesses.
It's not atmospheric nitrogen.
It'd be micro.
I mean, no, sorry. It's not like it's not like it's monoatomic nitrogen. It's diatomic atmospheric nitrogen, right? Or it's not that is what I'm saying. It's like something that's like maybe an organic molecule. Like, it's not like it's straight up nitrogen. That's what I was trying to communicate.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's like slightly nitrogen enriched because the air that is in the water is H2O, right? So there's 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen, and part of that oxygen, if you look at the oxygen that we all breathe, there's a little bit of CO2, right? There's 400 parts per million, but then there's nitrogen in that, and then there's it's a composition of a bunch of different gases.
Yeah, most of the air, right, is nitrogen, and and this gets to a point I wanted to sort of bring up, which is that like we often talk about this in context of like what's best for like a plant that's natural, or like trying to be very cognizant of like the sort of the natural parameters that these plants live under, but like we use what we see now or what we've seen in the recent geologically like a petosecond of time going by. when like cannabis has been around for a long time, and there's been tons of like things that have happened, and in that span of time that has changed the earth. And so like what is normal, even like in that concept, like that's an easy thing for anyone to say, well, what is really normal, and sort of like abstract it out. And my intention is not to like make everything too relativistic so that nothing matters, but my point is to like challenge the viewpoint, I guess, that like what we see now is, one, the correct way it should be, two, natural, and three, like that is mutually exclusive from other things that have happened in the past. Like the past 20 million years, that there have been lots of changes.
Like,
and
what about
primarily with how cannabis has grown, right? And
darkness,
where we grow it now.
Darkness breaking cycle, this new light deprivation technique, that they're breaking the dark cycle with 2 hours of like low light, and they're getting light deprivation. Have you guys read about this?
Are you talking about the gas
I
lamp
think we've
routine?
talked about it a bit, right?
What is it?
Where the gas lamp routine, where this is an old thing that farmers up north used to do to keep their plants in veg. Essentially, in the middle of the night cycle,
No, this is forced flowering.
Oh, okay, never mind.
Creating 2 nights in one.
Oh, so where you run like a 6-hour day, 1 hour night, 6-hour day, 1 hour night, and you're basically doing like 12-12 over like different cycles.
Yes,
you're not running a 24-hour day, essentially.
Yeah, except for your 12 hours of light is not broken. So you have 12 hours of light, or rather, I'm sorry, you would have like 16 hours of, or whatever it is, naturally right now, like 14 and a half hours of light, depending on your latitude. And you would break up your, remaining night. So it's really bizarre. I haven't read enough about it, but it literally takes the 24-hour night cycle and breaks it into like these disproportionate sections. And I think of it like almost like if the Earth were orbiting the sun in a, I don't know what it's called, but it's like it orbits really close and then it goes far away. Well, not elliptical, but like when it slingshots every round, it gets really close and then it goes far away. And I'm like,
technically, okay, it's still ellipsoid. I think it's still accurate.
Yeah, but I'm specifically saying that the ellipses would be only one of its orbits. The other orbit is a perfect, or almost, much tighter, like orbit around the sun, creating a much shorter night or day, twice potentially. Okay, this is sort of like out there, right? But this is what my brain went to when I heard about this. I'm like, how would the plant adapt to this? How is this possible? Why can it do this?
Because of selection pressure, some would say.
Crystals. I think that it was a little bit difficult to understand the explanation as far as like I'm sure there's a lot of people in the chat that are a little bit confused. So until we learn a little bit more about that particular technique, I think we'll shelf that. And
dude, I'm confused, but I brought it up hoping that one of you smarties would know.
Well, I wanted to say, unless somebody else has more thoughts on that, about the pH range thing, that those charts, in my opinion, are the best guesses. Cannabis, like we mentioned earlier, is not the most well-studied quite yet. It's being more and more studied, but we still don't have definitive evidence. Like if you go on Grow Eat Easy and look up hydro range for their pH chart, and then they have a soil range for their pH chart, and then you Google that, there's 35 different examples where there's 35 different ranges for nitrogen and other things. So maybe the nitrogen is available at the 5.5. Maybe it's available at 6.5. And maybe it depends on the medium that it's in. Maybe it's other conditions. And I wanted to say with Matthew's point, like in the Ice Age, when cannabis was almost extinct, several of them, but when cannabis, I think I pushed up to like the mountaintops in like India or in one of those areas where there was a very close to extinction event. I think at those times, the plant is like, well, fuck, like I got to figure out how to get nitrogen up when it's 3 pH or 4 pH or 5 pH, whatever it is, like the non-ideal condition. It's like, I'm going to figure and take up whatever nutrients I can. And in those times, it figured out a way. So like Matthew mentioned, in different eras, cannabis might have been taking up different nutrient levels at different pH ranges.
Am I just too fucking high? But last time I fucking knew, you fucking interrupt the dark cycle with light, you get Hermes. What? Why would you even want to do that?
Dude, they're doing it. I shit you not.
Is too high.
Just because people do it doesn't make it a good idea. I'll just say that.
That's true.
Why
No,
would
that's
you
not a
doubt
good
it?
idea.
You guys don't know anything about
still,
it. I'm
I was
telling
just
you
saying,
a little bit I know. Like, you should look into this. Like, I know I'm going
Yeah,
to.
it goes against everything I know. So I was super interested.
That's why I think we're questioning. We're skeptical. We want to know more. I think I remember reading stuff on the forums about people that experimented with a clone they knew. Let's say it was GMO. It finishes in 80 days or 77 days or 82. Some people take it really late, like 11 weeks. So if we can make that GMO finish in 10 weeks, that's a win, right? So we took a full week off the production time. So if we can try running, instead of 12 on, 12 off, let's do 6 on, 6 off. So then it basically goes through 2 day cycles per day. So it's getting essentially 12, 12, but twice per day at 6, 6, 6, 6. So you go 6 on, 6 off, 6 on, 6 off. So instead of it thinking that one day happened on a 12, 12, maybe it thinks that 2 days happened because it had a light cycle and a dark cycle. People have experimented with that kind of stuff and reported that maybe it lowered flowering time. Some of them reported it lowered yields. There's another experiment, and not even an experiment, this is a real legitimate technique that's done, called the gas lamp routine for vegging. For people up north where they don't get enough sunlight, they run their lights for only a little bit of time to break the flowering cycle. So in the middle of the night, they'll run lights for 1 hour so that it breaks the photoperiodism and prevents the plants from forcing themselves into flower. And some people do that instead of vegging for 17, 18, or 24 hours of light, which costs a lot of money. They'll veg for 13 hours, where it's like 12 hours on. They let the dark cycle happen for 5 hours, and then they interrupt it for 1 hour because that keeps it in veg. And it makes the hormones not able to go to flower. Sorry, Todd, did you have something there?
I was just going to say, you brought it up though, that a lot of people are promoting that now because of the cost savings in electricity. And yeah, there's people that preach that hard. I never tried it. It's like, it's unnatural to me, but yeah, it probably works. But you know, change is hard for people, definitely.
Well, and for nature, I mean, it wasn't to my knowledge, there hasn't been anywhere on the planet where there's been 6 hours on, 6 hours off. There is places where it gets like 20 hours on, where like autoflowers, I think, are interesting because like in Alaska, where they have those long ass day cycles, if they got it warm enough in a greenhouse, like maybe they could grow some killer ass autos because they have such a amazingly long day cycle during a certain point in the year. And there's definitely ways to take advantage of these types of things where I think that it's cool to. I don't think we're going to see those types of light cycles ever in nature, but it's definitely cost saving. If you're interested in these types of things, there's a guy, Lost Leaf, who's in Michigan, and he talks a lot about DLI, even running just like 11, 13 versus 12, 12 for flower, which is something I do. But there are people that go even more to the extreme, like 10 on, 14 off. So there's a lot of experimentation still to be done, and even like adjusting spectrums. Spartan, have you considered using that science LED to start playing around with the spectrum at some point?
Nope.
Keeping it simple?
Yep. Man, it's just like you start adding moving parts. What happens? Yeah, I did.
Sometimes you find amazing shit. So I was just watching a coral video, right? And these guys are called reefers. They grew under metal halide for a while, but when the LEDs came out, they were like getting similar results, and then they started going more and more blue, and it brought out way more color in their corals, where their corals must be green. Oftentimes, they started getting like pinks and purples and lots more expression. So you never know.
Well, I did play with it a little bit when I first got it, but then when they changed the app, I'm like Tao said, you start fucking with shit, then making it difficult for me. I'm not gonna fuck with it anymore. And I'm just going to set it up basic and not have to deal with it, because you start making things a pain in the ass for Spartan to do, and Spartan doesn't do them anymore.
I think there's a certain appreciation that I have for that. I have two kind of minds of it. And I think a lot of people are the same way. On the one hand, keep it simple, stupid. The other hand, like champion for that like cool little intricacy that will like give me that small edge, and like use as much as I can as possible. And trying to combine those in some like useful hybrid can be a little bit difficult, but I think that's totally valid, Spartan.
Well, I mean, I'm coming up. I just went through. It was finalized on Tuesday. I just went through a divorce. My youngest son, he turned 18, so it's kind of at the point in my life right now where I'm kind of trying to wind down and make things simpler. You know what I mean? So you have to understand that too, because I'm not in the push. I'm not trying to be at the bleeding edge. You know what I mean? I just want to grow really good weed, and I want it to come easy. I mean, I'm not saying I'm super lazy. I spend more time in my my room with my plants than I do most people, hands down, 100%. But
Some might say that slow is smooth and smooth is fast.
yeah, hell yeah. Yeah,
That's
I like slow and smooth.
I like
my
that quote.
style.
Yeah,
Yeah,
me
you
too.
could put me on that same list, Spartan. I spend a lot more time with my plants than do other people, but I also want it to be simple. I want it to be because if it's complicated and it's too over the top, it becomes not fun anymore. You know, I mean, when you're doing something like this and you're seeing great results, and it's not as hard as other things. Because as you all know, with growing is really can be some of the easier stuff. When you're talking about hauling water, you're talking about trimming, you're talking about transplanting, you're talking about flipping, you're talking about pods. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that goes into this, man, if you really want to do it. So
yeah, to be fair,
I'm all
doing
with
it.
you about making it simple, man.
Yeah, bro. And like, to be fair, that's what I do for a living. I mean, I go to work. That's my job. I'm doing all that, and I'm hustling, and I mean, that's a whole different. I'm in a whole different mode. I'm a whole different person. I'm working way the fuck harder. Then when I get home, it's like I don't want to keep doing that after just doing that for 8 hours. I'm going to take it easy, and I'm going to make it enjoyable. I'm going to have my shoes off. You know what I mean?
You need that no-till shit kicking or spawning.
It pretty much is, except for I don't do the cover crops. I do in my tent. I have 2 pots that I do it, but it's just such a stress on the environment to keep up with that many fucking plants with that much moisture being, pushed into the air all the time. It's like 2's enough. If I had a whole, even that tent, if I filled that tent and all my pots like that, I would struggle to keep the humidity down. I know it, especially in sips when they can just drink as much as they want.
Dude, that's hilarious that you say that. I live in the Pacific Northwest. It is pouring down rain, and I have 3 dehumidifiers going. A big Quest one in the corner. I have a little 50-pint one, and then I have a little, like, I don't even know what it is, 30-pint. And I go in there, all 3 of them are on. I'm like, okay, humidity's gonna be high. It's 65% with all 3 of them going. So yeah, humidity's a big deal. If you don't know how to get that down, and if you can't get it down, you can't move that air. Whew.
I meant to mention this last week. I think Aaron the grower was talking about, or somebody else was talking about on the larger scale. And something that I learned from Cannabis Mechanical on Instagram was looking into air conditioners reheat setting, and that acts as basically a dehumidifier. So if you already have air conditioners, which Noah, I know that you have some mini splits. If you pay some whatever cost to an AC guy, or if you know an AC guy, hopefully, because with your situation, I don't know, bringing people into your room is probably not ideal for most people. But if they can set up the reheat setting for you, your air conditioner can work as a dehumidifier on top of all the dehus that you have. And that could be the extra little kick that it takes to get you down into the more drier ranges.
Interesting.
Honeywell, I believe, is the one that has it already programmed into the setting. You just have to buy the heating coil that goes in basically where the output is.
Yeah, I would definitely talk to an HVAC professional of some sort and let them know what unit you have. Just call them up and say, hey, I have this unit. Is it possible to get a reheat setting or attachment for it? And maybe they'll be able to let you know, because from what I understand, it's even like more efficient on the electrical. Like it's a very efficient dehumidifier, and they're setting up a bunch of these commercial grow rooms in Oklahoma right now. And he's using that. I've follow this guy on Instagram, and you see him going from one giant ass commercial facility to the next, and a bunch of people are putting it in and seem to have really, really good result. Does anybody have any suggestions for dehumidification on a smaller scale, like tent growers? I know it can be a big trouble for a lot of people. Have a hard time bringing that RH down.
I could probably go out and look, because I bought 2 of them. There's one behind this wall, but I got them from Best Buy a while ago. Man, it had to have been 5 years ago or something. They had a deal where you could, I don't know, they had a super good deal on them. They're like $300 for these really big. They're made by a company. It was called like DeLonghi or something. Really weird name. DELONGI, I think it was. They've been running for 5 years straight, and I have no complaints, man. They're nice. Just little wheeled dehues, man. With this, they had the little side, so you don't have to empty the bottoms. They have the bottom catch, but they have the, what do they call that? Where you diverter or whatever, where you could just kick it out the side and hook a hose to it. And then I have a crock that I can just stretch the hose right to it, so I don't even have to empty my dehumidifier. It just drains right into the crock.
That's the best way. I think anybody who can, I'd suggest they set it up that way, because inevitably people are going to end up filling up that tank quicker than they expect to, and they won't be there, and it'll either overfill or stop working. And neither of those is great options for your grow. So having that pipe out so you just never have to worry about it. I think some people even reclaim that water and use it. And so there's ways to get creative with that.
One tip is if you don't have like a way to, like a drain or something for the hose, you can still, a little hack that I've done in the past and is built a little, just out of wood or whatever, build a little stand to hold that dehumidifier up off the ground. So you can slide a 5-gallon bucket next to it, and you can still kick it off the side just with like a short piece of PVC or something, or just use the piece that comes with it that screws into the side that you can screw the hose into. Just don't screw a hose into it. Let it sit there and put your 5-gallon bucket underneath that. And that should get you through a day, probably 5 gallons, hopefully.
I have that exact same setup, but mine is into a trash can. And I had a trash can with wheels, just a little teeny one, like whatever you get from Home Depot, and that the bottom of it caved out after about 6 months. So I had to go get the actual one that you get to your curb. I have that one, and it's heavy duty, and it's lasted for a couple of years. But yeah, every 2 days I have to empty a trash can full of water. So yeah, and my father-in-law built me that wooden stand, and I have the hose going into it. So
hell yeah, man.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with that.
Dump that. I just have the 5-gallon bucket, and I'll take a 5-gallon bucket and I would dump it into the Berkey filter. Reuse that shit. Just filter it out.
Really?
Filter it again. Fuck yeah, just filter it again. Use every drop, and then use it again.
Yeah, I always try to repurpose stuff. So I use it outside currently for like, in the summers, I'll use it for my lawn. And so that's what my lawn gets water. And I'll just water a different spot every other couple of days.
Yeah.
Then I'll use it for also my flowers and my vegetable garden. And I'll think I'm really cool. And I'll take the little can thing and I'll dip it in there, and then I'll walk around and water my strawberries. And I repurpose it for sure.
Dude, I've been eating strawberries for a week. Every day I go out there and get like a handful. I love it.
I think people listening can understand why floor drains are like a grower's wet dream now. Listening to getting rid of this dehumidifier water, having that floor drain or any sort of legitimate drain in your grow space is really nice.
It can prevent a flood, or at least help a little bit. I mean, shit. Who hasn't baptized their room?
People that hand water, I'll say that. People that hand water haven't baptized the room yet because they don't have to worry about, I guess, flooding. The float valve is the anti-baptism of the room, right? For most people, if it's functional, a functional float valve.
That's the thing, is they don't stay functional forever. That's the usual, the culprit. Yeah. It's usually the wanted, put them on the wanted poster. It's that fucking float valve. They
need to make like a one step higher float valve, because you know how everybody just buys like the cheapest one.
Yeah.
So I saw somebody use a float valve like Spartan was talking about. They had a 5-gallon bucket, and they had a float valve that figured out they needed to drain that 5-gallon bucket into another 5-gallon bucket. So if they got like lazy and they wanted to go on vacation that didn't have a larger garbage can, it eventually went like bucket to bucket to bucket. And they set up like 3 or 4. So it was an interesting setup. I was like, that just seems like a little bit more work than
the vacation bucket system. I like it.
You got to do what you got to do. Sometimes people are going to get away from their grow for a little while. And I applaud everybody. There's a guy, Automation is Freedom. He's gotten a copy of 50 Strands Green, and he's a supporter of this show and many others. I just, whenever I see his name in chat, I'm like, damn, like automation is freedom. Like if you did set it up, automation, you could go on more trips and spend less time in the garden if you wanted to, or more time in the garden doing other things than watering, like, pruning or training the plant or transplanting and all that other good stuff. The American one, do you have any clones going right now? I'm curious because I know you're normally a seed popper.
Yeah, I keep or I attempt to keep a lot of plants perpetually. I got cuttings of Time Wreck And I'm planning. I got to take cuttings of a whole bunch of them. Yeah.
Timex, the quick rooter, right? That's the one that you kept it on because it roots every time and roots real quick.
That's exactly why. And now that I think about it, I may not even be that good of a grower because I try out so many different strains. I might just have easy growing strains that I can't mess up. And that's good for me. I'll take it. And they're good. They're good for the head though. But yeah, the ones that Bruce Banner, it's really hard. I want to just kill it off now. But
what about that butter cheese? Shit, you put it outside. How's that thing doing?
Oh,
Mutant.
dude, it did not take like I thought it would. It's barely alive. It's barely alive.
It was barely alive inside, so shit. I mean, it's
No,
not much
but
worse.
half of it died off. There's one little thing, a sprig of green. I think it's going to die on its own now. It did the exact opposite of flourishing in the sun. It got eat up. It killed it. We'll see what happens. I didn't give up. I was just at it just like an hour ago, looking at the thing like, oh man.
My new theory is it was some sort of virus and the sun killed it. It's like, fuck you, plant. I'm going to kill off all the pathogen inside you. And that was most of the plant. And then it just, now
we'll
the
see
only
what
bit
happens.
growing.
Maybe that's it. Meristem cleaning by the sun, and that's all that's left. It's like tissue culture by nature. We'll see if that.
So you put a plant outside and from inside, and it didn't do well, basically.
Yeah, dude, it was a fucked up mutant plant.
Dude, you got a shade cloth, a plant.
Get a hard
Oh
one.
no! I hardened it off. I had it in the window getting some speckled sunlight.
Okay.
And yeah.
Well, that sucks.
This ain't Tao's first rodeo. He was an old school guerrilla grower. I fucking know the story. I've heard the stories.
Yeah, I know they need to be hardened off. I just preaching though. So that's why I had a whole bunch of time rack because people are asking me for them. And to be honest, I've been procrastinating on shit. I had stuff come up. I had like issues, family issues and shit. So I started up a whole bunch of those, and like I didn't even see the roots out the bottom. I've had them in solo cups, and I'm like, just make sure you harden these off. Like, what do you mean? Like, do not put them in the sun. Like, leave them in the shade for like a while. And then I sent them a couple of articles from regular vegetable hardening off things from Garden Supply, whatever. But yeah, you got to harden them off, or else they'll sunburn. It's like put an Irish person out in the sun like in July. If you do that, the first time exposure, they'll be fried like a moe.
Well, it's getting pretty close. I'm gonna take this time to jump out of here, guys. I got another show, and my son's been texting me, so he wants to stop by real quick. So I want to go see what he's up to. And but it was awesome hanging with you guys. I like this show. It was like was just hanging with my buds. I didn't even hardly smoke any. I was so like into the conversation. I was fucked up. Shout out to chat. I didn't keep track of chat. I suck. Sorry guys, I suck. But I'll try to keep up. It's fucking hopping so fast now. I don't know how we got all popular all of a sudden, guys. But hope to see you guys all next week. Grows love.
Good seeing you, man.
And fucking
see you, man.
Peace out, Spartan.
Peace out,
Have
guys.
a good one.
Oh, you're
So
muted.
how's everybody doing?
Don't everybody jump all at once.
I thought
Oh,
I lost my internet for a second.
Yeah, I thought somebody was muted.
In any
Is Jack
case,
there?
I think he might have had an issue actually. Yeah, otherwise he'd be speaking up.
Anywho.
Yeah, sunlight. Why would that happen? I mean, I did harden it off. I babied it out
But
there.
maybe it wasn't hard enough, perhaps.
That's true
Man.
too.
I got
as you know,
Plants can be
anybody
weird.
who's grown for a long time, sometimes plants just do weird shit. I mean, I don't know.
That's
Yeah.
totally. Like to put it really simply, that's very true. Like they're living things. Sometimes you get weird, like
It was depressed.
idiosyncrasies. Yeah.
It was a total mutant plant though too. If you guys had seen it, it was not like. Oh yeah, you guys did see it, right? That's why you.
Oh,
know.
it was the mutant
It was
one.
that plant.
Yes.
Oh, that is
So it
such
wasn't
a
from the
bummer,
sunlight.
dude. So is it
Oh,
gone
too bad.
now? Save it. Bring it
has
in.
It has one little stitch of green on it, but
I think it's dead then.
yes, half of it is dead, dude. There was two sprigs of growth, and like the one side is totally dead, and the other side is on its last leg. But
Bummer.
no, see, that was the only way. I was like, I'm gonna put it outside, and hopefully, I was hoping it would fix everything, or at least make it grow some, because it was like in a stagnant phase. And I even put it in a new container with like fresher soil, and yeah, but it's not totally dead yet. You keep your fingers crossed. It's gonna die though.
And that really ices the cake. I didn't know it was that plant, dude. That's a major bummer.
Oh, but all right. So, Aaron, you're Dep. So you just started it. That one video clip you guys did, or was that the beginning of the light up, or you've been doing it for a while? How much longer you got?
I just flipped those. So
Right.
they got so big. The two biggest ones got so big, I had to rebuild my greenhouse around the 200-gallon pot to fit so that the tarp wouldn't drag against the buds.
Right.
But yeah,
Yes.
it just got out of control.
Well, that's a good thing, man. It's better. Yeah, good thing you caught it and are protecting it.
Yeah. Speaking of light dep, I got a tip for everybody. If you're running light dep and you have power, throw up a good ventilation fan and ventilate your hoop for, if you can't do it all night, but at least the first hour that you pull the tarp over it for all my deppers.
Yeah, that'll definitely help the RH drop after the tarp's pulled. It can get a lot of mold in there if you don't have a good exhaust fan. Some people wait until it's pitch black, like at midnight, and take the tarp off for a little bit there to, if they have really bad RH problems. But I think that one causes you to have to be up at midnight or whenever it's dark enough.
And you
then
could just be exposing it to high humidity if it's a high humid night.
Yeah, exactly. And then the other issue is I lost my train of thought a little bit, but yeah, it's a bunch of additional work, and the fan being there consistently, you're just gonna make your life a whole lot easier. So it's
Botrytis is a non-issue for me since I've done that. I'll just say that.
What fan do you recommend?
Your cheapest 450 CFM. You gotta figure out your cubic feet. So if your hoop house is a shape, figure out how much volume of air you need to move and make sure your fan can pull that amount of air in 5 minutes or less. That's my rule.
I've seen some not necessarily extraction fans, but they're like good for greenhouses. They're solar powered. I think it's called a snap fan, and people put them like on their posts and things like that. And there's definitely some good options for people that are off grid, light depping, to look into maybe some solar powered fan options, at least for the stuff that just moves the air around in the hoop house or whatever. Because air movement is super effective. I found if you can keep the air moving at a pretty strong rate, it cuts down most of your pest issues, not just mold, but also a lot of the climbing, flying, crawling types. They just don't like having a ton of wind around, and it makes life a little bit more difficult for them. But some of them travel on wind, so they don't seem to mind it. And IPM is always really pivotal. Matthew, are there any pests out there that are not deterred by wind that people should look out for?
I mean, obviously the crawlers are going to be a little bit less affected, right? A lot of insects, like you were talking, are a lot of pest insects are not very great flyers. But what I mean by that is that they're not very strong flyers. They either fly very low to the ground in a short burst, kind of like how like fungus gnats is an example. They walk along the ground a lot. They prefer to walk to some degree. But if they were caught in like a gust of wind, that would be like, even one that was like a breeze for us can be like a little bit harrowing for them, or at least like it'll make them use more energy in general. How much of a functional effect that has in the greenhouse, I think you'd probably need a lot more wind probably going around at the time. But things like wasps and other sorts of, and even moths are going to be a little bit better at traversing the wind and probably aren't going to be such a big deal. And those are the ones that are very destructive, or at least the moths are.
I've heard good things about the Dyna traps that are for catching like flying moths and different flying pests. Can be good for greenhouses. Sungrown 707 has used that up in the 707 with good success. I know there's a lot of different pest pressure up there than maybe down here in San Diego, but he has mentioned that it helped deal with a lot of his flying pests. So that is one way to prevent them. I know there's probably other brands. I'm not sponsored or affiliated by them, but it's something my buddy has tried and had success with. So figured I'd share it with the community out there. Matthew, I remember a while ago you mentioned the atmosphere is sort of like an ocean that the pests can move through. And I can't remember, was it like maybe an aphid or something that like it wasn't flying, but it was sort of floating on the air?
Yeah. So like, yeah, air and water are fluid media. And so they have a little bit of a similar physics going on. Like a gas and a liquid and a solid are kind of like three states that have similarities in some capacity. So aphids, for example, are one of those insect groups that aren't really great flyers. A lot of beetles are also kind of unwieldy flyers. They got that all that armor on them usually. But aphids, so like there's two different terms. One term is aerobiota, and the other term is aeroplankton. And so technically, the difference is that aeroplankton, like marine plankton, don't control their own movement in the fluid medium, and aeroplankton, or I'm sorry, aerobiota do to some degree. And so like something that has wings typically is going to do a lot better than like a bacterium on like a fleck of dirt, right? That being said, even the aphids aren't going to be very good at it. They'll get up into the like really high in the atmosphere even and coast along on those currents. And in that way they might glide sort of. And I couldn't give you like the play-by-play about what's going through an insect's or particularly an aphid's brain when it's like, you know, flying that far out, and like how it like recognizes hosts and to what degree of precision that happens. But it's definitely there are visual components. There are chemical components like the senses of like chemicals, like what we call like maybe like smelling essentially. And like they can see different spectra than us too, like UV radiation can be attractive, but too much of it can be disorienting, for example. And then when they get out of that air current, they're not going to be like moving very deftly.
Thank you very much for clarifying that. I think it's interesting to see. I always I was sort of laughing a little bit in my head when you were describing how like the beetle, because it's so armored, doesn't necessarily fly well, and even some of the other like lower flying pests. Like if you think of in comparison to like early human flight, like a lot of our stuff didn't necessarily even like make it off the ground or flew for very short distances or low heights and things like that. And some of the things that we see in nature, I think like often some of these early aerial pilots were probably mimicking some of the things they saw in nature, like birds and other things like that, and trying to recreate them to have human flight.
There's a lot to that. In fact, like I really like the F-22 Raptor. I'm just going to put that out there. It's made aerodynamically unstable on purpose so that it can be super maneuverable in the air. And of course, we don't got bugs that are moving around with like jet engines and that sort of a thing. But that kind of physics, the stuff related to that is very fascinating to me too. I'm also a big ballistics nerd.
I'm also more of a ballistics nerd than I realized. The YouTube account I was thinking of was called Tau Fledermaus or something like that, and they shoot a bunch of different shotgun
Tau
slugs.
Fledermaus, yeah. That
Awesome.
means the bat is a fluttermouse.
Oh, okay,
the fluttermouse.
He shoots a bunch of different shotgun slugs and shows the basically slow motion camera of it hitting different targets, and it's really fascinating for sure. But this was grow related for a second, then I kind of lost my train of thought there.
Well, I mean, I'll just say this, having those cool interests can lead to like really interesting appreciations and understanding of nature. It's the same physics that's like enacting on like plants and even insects, the physics of their flight. And you know how I love to say this, and I'll say it again, they are the first ones to develop powered flight by their own powered flight anyways, instead of gliding and that sort of a thing. And I think there's a lot to be said of how that allowed them to get to be so diverse. And the food that they were generally always looking for in most of the case is plant material. So they were always chasing that plant, even out of the ocean, I guess, but they didn't have wings then.
I guess my thought was going back to the pH conversation way earlier when you're talking about the plane that was made intentionally off balance to be more maneuverable. There's stuff that we do in horticulture that doesn't necessarily take place in agriculture or in nature because we have the resources to apply something that we might believe to have benefit. Whether it
I
does or
love
not,
that parallel. That
there
is
is science that will argue both sides, and there are going to be product pitches from companies that put a lot of money into these sciences. But I do think sometimes there's really compelling, interesting, and unique things that are on the bleeding edge that might have potential, and then a lot of them are just snake oil. So it's fun to be in a time where we're sort of, in my opinion, at the tip of the iceberg still. There's still so much unknown, and it's fascinating to see it all sort of evolving and unfolding before our eyes. With that said, it's about 5:55 out here on the West Coast, so I'm gonna pass it off to my panel and let them give their final thoughts and shout outs. So first, Noah the Grower.
Yeah, I had a great show today. I sometimes I'll just kind of space off. Man, I was really just listening to everything. It was cool having Aaron. I'm trying to do this whole organic thing, so all these organic OGs it's really cool to kind of pick their brains and stuff. But yeah, I'm Noah the Grower on Instagram. If you got any questions for me or want to see what I got going on, come check it out there. And see you next week.
Thanks you so much, Noah, for joining us, and always a pleasure to have you. Next up, Aaron the Grower.
Yeah, thanks for the shout out, Noah. And it was really good being here, really fun being here. Had a good time. And I trimmed like probably 2 ounces while we did it. So shout out to trimming, doing two things at once. I am Aaron the Grower, ATG Acres on Instagram, YouTube, and atgacres.com. If you're into my weird ass shit, check me out.
Hell yeah, man. I think they call that feeding two birds with one seed instead of killing two birds with one stone. Taking it to the positive a little bit there.
So
Getting two things done at
PC.
once. Yeah, vegan friendly. This is a vegan friendly show. But with that said, our IPM specialist, speaking of bugs and animals in general, Matthew Gates.
Yeah, I'll echo what Spartan said earlier. Shout out to chat specifically, Stoney Rockefeller, Chad Westport, Katie. I see you guys come on every time we're here, and it's really endearing to sort of develop this community, this feeling of collaboration, and indeed this actual functional collaboration. I always appreciate the quickness that we can do that with. And if you're going to support me even more, and if I can support you any more, please let me know. You can find me on Zenthanol, the YouTube channel. You can also find me on Instagram at SyncAngel, but I know you all know that in chat. And I would just ask that if you guys want to support us more, as cliche as it is, hit the like button, comment, give us really cool comments. I love it when people come after the video and comment, and they have some intriguing questions, I know Jack does come back and explain some things, certainly, and other people on the panel do too. And so it's become a repertoire for some good information, and I'm proud of that.
I definitely want to echo that sentiment because I do try to reply to the comments that are like asking questions or providing us feedback, maybe stuff that they want to see. One case, the person was talking about what they thought the genetic lineage of root beer was, and then I went and found the root beer on me and Gene's page, and I wrote out the full section of it, and then we ended up talking about it the next week on the show. So I totally agree that that comment section is a little gold mine for us. It's great communication. Stony like Baloney's here, GR 420 community videos, Crispy Wannabe, Supreme Grape. It's like I can't find a name that I haven't seen weekly. Fried Piper, Chad Westport. Like if I scroll up, it's like I know every single one of these names, and eventually we're going to be meeting these people in person. I really do plan to do a cheap home grow meetup in person someday, so I'm putting that out there to the community. I think Las Vegas would be the easiest place to make it happen because it has cannabis friendly nature and it's really cheap to travel to. But this wouldn't be a one and done thing. This is something like we've been doing the show for years. I hope to do it at maybe Vegas, then San Diego, LA, whatever. We'll go around and meet up with the community because it's honestly, everybody I've met so far has been so awesome. And I think it's going to continue in that way. And we've been growing slowly but surely. Lots of cool people, like Matthew said, remind you all to give that thumbs up and just keep coming back. We really enjoy you. And I think the last person I haven't gotten to is Tao, the American one.
Jack, again, thanks for hosting. Shout out to Shane. Shout out to chat. I'm always in and out of chat, so sorry if I missed anybody, but it's always good checking in and seeing everybody there. And yeah, to be honest, I'm gonna have to go back and check out some of the comments because I really been lacking and I'm not checking out the old episodes. So I'll go back and take a look. And with that, peace out, everyone.
Thank you so much for joining us, the American one. It's definitely there's some gems in there. Like I said, I re-listen to the episodes at least once throughout the week just to refresh myself. I learned something like that's going to change in my garden this week. Spartan and I were talking about the pumice or stuff underneath to make a sip and veg, and it's something that I'll actually implement. So like each week I try to learn and grow a little bit with the show, and I think a lot of the people that listen and join this panel are in a similar feeling. So I'm just appreciative of everybody else who shows up and listens and interacts in the chat. Thank you all for coming and providing us with lots of questions and feedback and support. My name is @JackGreenstock on Cannabis, as well as Instagram, Jack_Greenstock on Twitter. And I have 50strains.com. If you want a copy of 50 Strains of Green, you can kind of see it right here. That's my first published book. That's the second edition. I've still got some paperback copies available. So if you'd like one, definitely hit me up, or you can just go right on the website and order yourself a copy. And thank you all so much. See you next week. Growers love from Dr. MJ, since he was not with us this week. And shout out to Spartan Grown, who I was gone earlier when he left. Big shout out to @SpartanGrown and SpartanGrown@gmail.com. Thank you all so much. Catch y'all next week. Greenstock signing out. Peace.